In the last lesson, we learned about congruent figures and how to prove that two triangles were congruent just based on the definition of congruent polygons or congruent triangles. You had to determine 3 pairs of corresponding sides were congruent between two triangles, and that 3 pairs of corresponding angles were congruent before you could determine that the triangles were congruent. In this lesson, you're going to learn about triangle congruence with 2 postulates that'll be a lot easier to determine that 2 triangles are congruent. One is the side-side-side postulate, which just says if the 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to the 3 corresponding sides of another triangle, then those 2 triangles are congruent. So using this postulate, you only need the 3 pairs of corresponding sides to be congruent between the 2 triangles before you can determine if the triangles are congruent. In this particular diagram, we have side AB is congruent to side DE, and we have side AC is congruent to side DF, and we have side BC is congruent to side EF. So we can say that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF because of the side-side-side postulate. Before going to the next postulate, we need to understand what the word included means. The word included refers to an angle that is included between 2 sides, or it could refer to a side that is included between 2 angles. So here on this diagram, we have angle A. Angle A is included between side BA and side AC. Those are the 2 sides that actually form the angle. So the angle is included between them. On the other side, we have side BC. Side BC is included between angle B and angle C. So we have to know this definition for included before you can understand the next postulate. So the next postulate is the side angle side postulate. And it indicates that if 2 sides and the included angle of one triangle are congruent to 2 sides and the included angle of another triangle, then those 2 triangles are going to be congruent. So in this diagram, we have side AB is congruent to side DE, and we have side AC is congruent to side DF, and you've got the angle that's in between. The angle that's in between on the is angle A on the left and angle D on the triangle on the right. So the angle that's in between those sides that are congruent, that angle is also congruent. So we can say that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF because of the side angle side postulate. And notice that that's intentional, that we abbreviate that with SAS, where the A is in the middle and it indicates that it is the angle that's included in between the two sides. So let's go look at the examples. In the first problem, we are supposed to write a proof to prove that triangle RST is congruent to triangle UTS. These triangle congruence theorems are some of the most straightforward proofs that you will be writing. So these are usually very straightforward. So if we look here at what's given, we'll write a two-column proof. We'll put our statements and our reasons on the right, and put the information that's given, that side RS is congruent to side UT. So let's mark that on the diagram as well. RS is congruent to UT. And then we have RT that's congruent to SU as well. So mark that with a different congruence marking. RT is congruent to SU. And the reason those were given to us. So we have two pairs of the three sides. So we need to have a reason for that third side. So the third side is a shared side between the two triangles. And so we can say that side TS is congruent to side TS, because the property that says anything is congruent to itself is the reflexive property. The reflexive property of congruence. And then our third statement, we can make the statement that we're trying to prove, which is that triangle RST is congruent to triangle UTS because of the side postulate. In problem 2, you're asked what other information do you need to prove that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ADC by side angle side. So it specifically wants you to use the side angle side postulate. And of course, explain your answer. So let's look at the diagram and see what the diagram tells us. We can already tell from the diagram there's a shared side, AC. So we already know that that AC is congruent to AC because of the reflexive property of congruence. So we have that information that we can use. And we also can tell from the diagram that we have two right angles. So we already know that all right angles are congruent by the right angle congruence theorem. So we already have that angle ACB is congruent to angle ACD because of the right angle congruence theorem. So we have that much from the diagram as well. So the other piece of information that we have to have in order to prove that these two triangles are congruent by side angle side is we have to have side BC congruent to side CD, because that would give you the sides that includes the angle that's congruent. So we need side BC to be congruent to side CD. That's the other piece of information that we need to have from that diagram, because that would give, because angle ACB and angle ACD are included between side AC and sides BC and CD. In the last problem, it asks, would you use side, 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 or side, angle, side to prove the triangles are congruent? If there's not enough information to prove the triangles are congruent by either of those postulates, then just write not enough information and explain why. So let's look at the first one. The first one, A, we have two pairs of corresponding congruent sides. And we have right angles that are included in between them. So that means that we can use side, angle, side, because we have two sides and the included angle. Are congruent. In the next one, in B, we have two sides that are congruent by the congruence markings, and we have two angles that are congruent. So we have one pair of sides, one pair of angles. To use either one of the postulates in this lesson, you have to have either all three corresponding pairs of sides be congruent, or you have to have two pairs of congruent sides and the angle that's included between them. You don't have either one of those. So here we have not enough information to determine if these triangles are congruent or not, because there's only one pair of sides that are congruent and one pair of congruent angles, and that's not enough information. In the third pair that we have three pairs of corresponding sides that are congruent. There's one pair of corresponding sides, two pair, and the third is also. So for this one, we're going to use side, 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 because you have three pairs of corresponding sides that are congruent. In the last example that we have here, we have one pair of congruent sides at the bottom, and then we have another pair of congruent sides, and then we have an angle that's not included in between those two congruent pairs of sides. So on that one, there's not enough information. So on that one, not enough info. Okay? Because we don't have the angle that's included between the two sides that are congruent, so we can't make that determination.